It's been just hours since President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran, but this morning, that temporary truce is looking fragile at best. Moments ago, an Iranian news agency reported Tehran halted oil tankers' traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Reopening the strait to commerce, of course, was a key part of the deal the president and his administration says Iran signed on to. Listen to Secretary Hegseth this morning.
What has been agreed to, what's been stated, is the strait is open. Our military is watching. I'm sure their military is watching, but commerce will flow.
One of Iran's demands in exchange was that Israel end its bombardment of Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The Israelis say they never agreed to that, and the strikes continue today, as you can see here in Beirut.
In terms of this latest news, I mean, obviously the ceasefire has only been live for less than 24 hours. And the fact that Iran can still close the Strait of Hormuz in just a whim is going to strengthen the U.S.'s resolve to ensure that it does not control or retain sort of sole control of the strait going forward. And obviously, when it comes to if the ceasefire is still ongoing, when it comes to ensuring a permanent deal, both sides are going to be very far apart on that particular issue. Stephen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The White House spent last night and this morning on a victory lap, declaring that President Donald Trump had pulled off a masterstroke by reopening the Strait of Hormuz. That was somewhat of an absurd claim because the Strait of Hormuz, of course, was open before he launched this war that was opposed by much of the world. But this new apparent closure will undercut the not only the White House claim that Trump has pulled off a massive victory here and that the Strait of Hormuz issue is not even going to be something that's going to be contentious going forward. I think it shows why a lot of people are arguing that despite all the propaganda coming out of Washington, the United States has absorbed a strategic defeat here, because it shows that going forward, at any moment, even a few hours into a ceasefire, Iran has the capacity to close that strait and create, again, that chokehold on the global economy. So I think it's going to be very irksome to the White House. The question is, how will they respond? Will they try to pretend this isn't happening, that it's just a teething problem? Or at some point, will President Trump's credibility and prestige and red lines again come into play in such a way as he has to take some military action, and then we're back where we were before?
Now we're seeing the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Just talk about how the escalation after the ceasefire last night has only increased.
Yeah, there are multiple sensitivities here. There are multiple narratives, not least what we've heard from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, not least what we've heard from a whole variety of Iranian officials who both sides claiming victory. So you have that, and it's not clear what precisely has been agreed. Pakistan's ambassador to the UN said that Pakistan's prime minister had sent he didn't describe it as a text on agreement, but an understanding to both the US and Iran, who had agreed to it. He didn't say precisely what was in it. He said that was bounded by secrecy to let the sides work out what are clearly very big differences at the moment. He spoke about the Pakistan's prime minister in his statement having primacy in this situation because it had been accepted by both Iran and the United States. And as you say, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu very clear that he doesn't see Lebanon as part of that ceasefire agreement, which is a difference with the Pakistani Prime Minister. Indeed, Israel launching its heaviest, by its own statement a few hours ago, its heaviest strike on Hezbollah targets inside of Lebanon, some of them deep inside of Beirut, coordinated against 100 targets. So has that led to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz? It's very hard to say, but it is certainly one of the many threads and strands of the lack of clarity, of the lack of certainty where everyone stands, of the multi-sided nature of what's been happening. Iran has, it appears, sent missiles and drones against a variety of targets in the Gulf today, long after the ceasefire. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said it would take some time, as he said, for the carrier pigeon to get out to some of the remoter Iranian military units who he says have been cut off from communications. But I think when we look at the state of play on Iranian state media, the declarations of victory, the popular support coming out in the street for the regime in Iran, it's hard to imagine that even in the farthest flung corners of Iran, military commanders haven't got the instruction yet to cease and desist. All of this is going to feed into that sort of uncertainty that can unravel what J.D. Vance called his precise words were a sort of an unstable ceasefire. A fragile was his precise word, ceasefire. I think all of that plays into it. And trying to get at which strand specifically is pulled that unravels the next one, very hard to say.
With me now is retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's the former commander of U.S. Army forces in Europe. So reopening the Strait of Hormuz was part of this deal. Is this ceasefire already broken in your view?
I think what Brett said earlier is correct. There is not really a ceasefire. These are not a couple of angry sergeants out there launching missiles. And I think we're going to have to listen to what the insurance companies say. If they are not willing to insure vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz, then the strait is in effect still closed. And I think this is why it's also important that the president and others not speak too quickly about things that are so tenuous because it ends up damaging their credibility.
And the president, as you know, has claimed victory here. At the same time, you have these attacks in the region. You have the Strait of Hormuz closed now by the Iranians based on our latest reporting, and things are very active and moving by the minute. That's where things stand right now. There seems to also be confusion between the U.S., Israeli, and Pakistani positions over whether Lebanon was included in the ceasefire agreement. How concerning is that?
Well, very concerning. And this is part of the problem when you don't have world-class professional diplomats handling these kinds of negotiations. The fact I was skeptical when I first saw that there was going to be a restriction on any operations in Lebanon or against Iranian proxies. I was pretty sure there was no way that Israel could agree to that. And so again, it's a mistake to claim a victory on something before you can be really sure that it's going to be done. And unfortunately this is a consistent problem with the administration of making claims about things that are just not the case, and that only damages us in the long run.
CNN's Anna Kuba joins us live now from London. So, Anna, I mean, listen, just in terms of where oil prices have gone, I mean, obviously after that ceasefire deal was announced just yesterday, we saw Brent crude, that we have it on the screen, and WTI all trading lower. They're roughly around $95 a barrel. Obviously, it's going to take some time, despite technically the fact that even yesterday the Strait of Hormuz was open. We all knew that it would take some time to sort of recoup the 20% of global oil that was lost during the war. Now that there is this fragile ceasefire and things do appear to be volatile and the strait is closed technically at this point onwards, just walk us through what that means for oil prices going forward, Anna.
Well, you're right. There was an enormous amount of optimism in markets, plunging oil prices, but we're still high. You know, the prices are still high. They're still not what they were before the war. Brent, the global benchmark, was around $73. Now we can see there it's around 94. So there's still a way to go. And the terms of this ceasefire or the way it's playing out currently, as you've said, are incredibly volatile. We're seeing that because of these strikes in Beirut, Iran is now saying that oil tankers can't get through the strait. And already the terms of the strait reopening as a result of the ceasefire were causing some really big questions for oil traders and for buyers. And that's because Iran was saying that it was still going to make sure that oil tankers were passing the strait in coordination with its military. And that raises questions as to whether we're going to see a similar dynamic play out, as Iran not allowing ships that have any sort of link to the US or Israel, whether they be insured or owned or crewed by countries that are aligned with Israel or the US. Is that still going to be the situation? And the big question mark about tolls. There were lots of reports around certain ships paying up to $2 million. That was a figure that was being bandied about to pass the strait. And now we've got reporting that says that Iran and Oman are thinking about allowing ships to pass through if they pay a transit fee. So I think that probably explains why we've seen these enormous falls because of the ceasefire itself, but not really back to where they need to be, which is where they were before the war.